Hey everyone, welcome to the Praecepta podcast. With me is Rob McClure. Rob is a composer, educator, electronic musician, and a better podcast host than me. So it's going to be a great episode. Someone better will be running the train. Um, so I'm sort of interested, Rob. Where did you grow up? How did you get introduced to music? How did that work for you? I know you're from Toledo, but growing up in the school system and then undergrad to grad school, how did that kind of work for you?
Sure. So, yeah, like you said, I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and my very first musical thing happened a little bit later. I started playing guitar when I was, I think, about 13 or 14 years old, with the sole purpose of being a rock star. Clearly, that didn't happen. um, but playing guitar, a lot of my friends in middle school and high school, they were in the music program at school. They were in band or orchestra or something. And it just seemed like I was the one person who wasn't doing that. So I was like, well, I play guitar. Could I be in the jazz band at school? And they were like, no, you have to play it like a sit down instrument. So the band director looked at me and he was like, here's some sticks. Go figure out just to play rhythms. So, so I started taking percussion lessons first at Dave's Drum Depot and in Toledo, Ohio, on some street that I can't remember anymore, which I think might be still around, maybe under a different name. And then I started studying percussion with Bob Bell, who at that time was uh, he wasn't the principal timpanist anymore, but he had been the principal timpanist of the Toledo Symphony, and at that time he was also the president and CEO of the symphony. So I started taking lessons with him on percussion, and then eventually added like piano lessons, and I picked up double bass to be in the orchestra. So by my second year in high school, I was already in you know, the the concert band and the orchestra and the jazz band, and taking lessons on percussion and piano. Um, in my senior year, my band director, who was Robert Haddad, my band director died pretty suddenly. And he was both band and orchestra director, so it kind of really shook the school. And he was not like, he was in his 40s or maybe early 50s or something like that. So that kind of struck a lot of us pretty hard. And I remember at that time I had my first music notation software program. I think it was called Music Right. Um, it was horrible at that time, and I was beginning to compose, like just kind of little projects. It sounded a lot like film composition and stuff like that. And I should say, I would, as a guitarist, I had a rock band, and I was writing songs, for the rock band, and just kind of acoustic singer songwriter stuff too. But when my band director died, I think it was after the memorial, or the viewing. I went home that night and I wrote something that turned out to be for like concert band and orchestra combined. Not full orchestra, just because it had euphonium and saxophones in it. But we ended up. I showed it to the assistant band director, and he said, let's do this at the memorial service. And that was really the beginning of composing, because my teacher, Bob Bell of the symphony, he came to see the concert along with Merwin Sue, who is the artistic director of the Toledo, well, some kind of artistic director of the Toledo Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
They came to see the concert, and the very next year of the Toledo Symphony was their 60th anniversary season, and they were starting to work with composers, Marilyn Shrewd being one of them, to write fanfares for the 60th anniversary of the Toledo Symphony. And they asked me to do one. And that was like a huge deal as an 18-year-old kid,
Yeah.
So it was kind of that experience that kind of started me down this composition path. So I did my undergrad at Bowling Green,
Alumni.
and yeah, and I studied with Roger Shoup in percussion, and composition was always just kind of a hobby because I was a music education major.
Okay.
Um, Composition was a hobby. I had some pieces performed. You know, my fellow classmates performed some pieces like Caitlin Bartholic and Cody Rex and some other certainly the percussionists that were there at the time. They performed my pieces, but yeah, then it wasn't really until my master's degree where I started studying composition formally. So master's degree at University of Arizona, and then doctorate at Rice University down in Texas.
Nice. That's it's so interesting. So I had a very similar experience where I was a guitarist. You know, had like two bands in high school.
Yeah.
Played upright bass in the orchestra. I was always like a strings guy,
Hmm.
and you know, but the way I got into it was we had a like electronic music class, and what would happen is the teacher was the orchestra director for the intro class. My mom said he's into music. Can you like help him out with something? And then took a music theory class. And I was like, I'm getting bored of the guitar, you know, because we were just playing rock, like classic rock. You know, we were
Right.
playing most of the canon at that point. And then like another band was like a harder, you know, playing Metallica and Green Day and the you know the more modern fun stuff.
That's exactly what I did too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Metallica, Green Day, Smashing Pumpkins, Blink 182 at that time. You know.
Well, you're you know you're up in like the late '90s, early 2000s. So like you know
Hmm.
for you that was current. You know
Right.
it was you know I was doing this in like 2012, 2015. I was born in
You're right.
'96. So
Yeah.
it's so funny to hear that you had a similar experience.
Yeah.
Um, but that's super cool. So um, so I guess my question is to sort of switch it up a bit. So how does it feel to be on the other side now? Because you've been a teacher in two places. You've been a teacher in Shanghai Conservatory, and you're a teacher at Ohio University. So I'm very curious what your experience was in you know the higher education because you started studying composition and what that was like, and then also what it was like what it's been being on the other side, especially you know with China versus Ohio.
Yeah.
Must have been a bit of a culture shock. Like how'd you get that gig? You know?
Well, yeah. So I should say that my time at Shanghai Conservatory, that was only 1 year. My main gig when I was over in China was Suzhou University. That
Okay,
I was there for the 4 years I was there. I was in that one job, and then my last year I was there, I also was a visiting professor at Shanghai
I
Conservatory.
see. Okay.
So yeah, Suzhou University. So I guess I'll start back with like grad school, being a student, and then like kind of transferring to the other side of it. So um, University of Arizona, I studied with Dan Asia, and I also took electronic music courses with Craig Walsh.
Okay.
And Arizona, so coming out of a music education degree with only hobbyist compositions, not really studying formally with anyone. Um, I was applying to composition master's programs because that's what I knew I wanted to do. I knew at the end of it, like, yeah, I could go be a band director right now, but I knew that that wasn't where I was headed. Like, it wasn't going to be what I wanted my future to be. So I applied to three different places. One of them ended up like I I didn't want to do the GRE, so I just ended up like I applied, but I was like, oh, I'm gonna take the GRE, and then I didn't, so it didn't matter. The other place really didn't give me the time of day. They saw like the music ed degree. I'm assuming they
Yeah.
saw the music ed degree and they saw the compositions and they were like, no thanks. University of Arizona, Dan Asia. Like I remember, I was driving home from my student teaching, which was out in Clyde, Ohio, which was like an hour and 10 minutes like one way drive for student teaching. Um, and he called me and he was just like, "Tell me your story. Like, tell me why I should admit you." Essentially,
Damn.
and we had about a 45-minute conversation, and I ended it pacing around the lockers right outside of the rehearsal hall at BG. And at the end of it, I basically told him like who I am, what I'm about, and my some of the story that I just told you about being in high school and that stuff. And at the end of it, he said, "Okay, I'm going to give you a shot, and I'm going to try to get you some money." And that like that leap he took on me was, I mean, I have never taken it for granted. Like he was basically looking at someone who had no training and say, "Okay, yeah, you can be a master's student here," you know, and and as being on the other side of that, as an educator, I make sure that I give the benefit of the doubt to people that are applying for, any school that I'm teaching at. So Ohio University, Suzhou, like, tell me your story. Like, I'm not gonna just dismiss you because you don't check the right boxes for me. Like, there might be something there, and so that's something that I'm trying to do as an educator. Um, from Arizona, I Kurt Stallman is a composer who teaches at Rice University, and he came to Arizona because one of at that point his current students, Ken Stewart, who had done his master's degree at Arizona and then went to Rice. He was like, "Oh, Kurt, you got to go to Arizona. You got to be a guest there." So Kurt came and did a presentation on his music, and I was so impressed. I was like, I want to study with this guy. So I did something that no one should ever do. When it was time to apply for doctoral students, I only applied to one place. No one should ever do that. That was a huge risk, and yeah, but it worked. So it's like I got to go to the place I really wanted to go to, and study with the guy I really wanted to study with. And as it turns out, studying with a lot of other amazing composers and having contact with such amazing performers at Rice University as well. Shihui Chen, uh, who's another composer there, she and Kurt are married, which is very rare for two composers to be employed at the same like amazing school. But she became one of my closest mentors. Kurt, obviously, Arthur Gottschalk, Richard Lavenda. I became very close with the faculty there, and I mean Rice University. I've never stopped singing its praises. It was a great experience for me. So at the end of Rice, we're starting to like look at, okay, what jobs are out there, and this was 2012 into 2013, and there were no jobs out there. Like,
Yeah.
let's be real honest here. So, Shihui Chen, she uh, she had contact with Hequan Wu, and Hequan Wu was in at Suzhou University and building this school. Um, and it was going to be kind of a Western style conservatory in a Chinese like normal university.
Okay, that makes sense.
And he was looking, he was reaching out to all of his contacts and saying, "Hey, we're building this school. Who do you know? Who would be good?" And I was in the office at Rice, like copying something, and she saw me and she was like, "You need to apply to this job right now," because my wife, her family adopted a boy from China when he was 5 years old. When we were in high school, I studied Chinese language in high school. She studied Chinese language in high school, and Shihui knew that, and she was like, "This would be perfect for you. You need to apply." And I was like, "Okay, I'll apply." Um, and so I did, and the application process was about 10 months long.
Oh, for visa and
Like,
stuff.
no, from initial application to second round to Skype interview to on campus interview. It was a very, very long process.
Is that
Uh,
normal? Is that normal?
No, it's totally
For the
not
Chinese
normal.
culture, or no?
No, no, no,
Okay.
no. It was just because the school was just starting and they were basically hiring everyone. So I was among a group of faculty, about 20 new faculty. We all came in at the same time and we were starting a school.
Whoa, that's awesome
So
though.
yeah, it was really exciting at the time. So I was one composer, there was one theorist, there was one musicologist, there was basically one of each instrument. We had a few gaps along the way, but we filled those with adjuncts. But our task was to create a school. And I was there for I was there for 4 years, and when I left, we had just graduated our first set of freshmen.
Nice.
So that was really gratifying to like see a group of students come in as freshmen and then take them all the way through. But um, it was very clear to me by the end of my time in China that for the sake of my children, I have two kids, both my kids were born in China, and my 3-year-old at the time, she was starting to near like that preschool age, getting in, about to go into kindergarten. And if you want your kids to have a Western education, you're going to have to pay college tuition prices for like every grade. And as an assistant professor of composition, I was not prepared to do that. So it was pretty clear we had to come back to the States. So my third year there, I applied pretty aggressively to all the jobs. Absolutely nothing came back. My fourth year, which was kind of getting a little scary in terms of the job prospects and like, am I going to get stuck over here? Am I going to get forgotten over here? I'm only able to get back to the States or to Europe maybe once or twice a year. I'm really not in the scene right now. So it was getting a little. There was some anxiety. I'll say that. And then all of a sudden, Ohio University, who I'd had a connection with as a doctoral student. There was a percussionist here named Aaron Levy who commissioned a percussion solo from me, and then later on in that degree did, or maybe it was a later degree of his, but he did like a portrait concert of my percussion pieces, and I
Awesome.
was just like, wow, thanks, man. So while I was at Rice, he got a grant and flew me to Ohio, and like he had me to his recital and other events surrounding it. So I had been to OU before. I had met some of the faculty before, and particularly Mark Phillips, who had been, Mark Phillips started at Ohio University a month before I was born.
Whoa.
So
Very.
he's been here forever, and in 2017 he was going on early retirement. So the job was opening,
Mm.
and I applied, and I, who knows how these decisions are made, but I want to believe that because I had that somewhat special connection to OU, it might have gotten my cover letter and my CV maybe into the next round.
Hmm.
And it was a very, very quick process. They asked me like a month before the Skype interview, or sorry, not a month, a week before the Skype interview, if I could do it. And then a week after the Skype interview, they said, "Hey, can you be in Athens in like a week and a half?"
What?
With, that's we're talking international travel, China to US, and that's
It's like 24 hours.
it's in time difference. It's like 12 or 13 hours depending on the time of year. In
Okay.
travel time, yeah, if you're going like Shanghai to Detroit, which is what I would usually do
Okay.
to get home, because my parents still live in Toledo.
Hmm.
It's about 16 hours, but because of the travel path, I had to essentially do between 24 and 30 hours of travel.
Is that just connections or stuff like that?
Yeah, I had like
Connecting flights.
three flights, and one of them was delayed horribly.
Oh,
And
Jesus. Jesus,
So
that's
it
awful.
was fun, but
I'm
but
sure you
yeah.
had
So
fun.
then I've been at OU. This is my fourth year at OU. So this is my eighth year of teaching.
Yeah, that's so cool. So now going to the other side. So it seems like you're sort of established at OU. You kind of had your journey, and you sort of come back. What? So I know you're a professor of composition and theory, which is like overarching term for
Mhm.
can mean a lot of things. What does it mean? What classes are you teaching? But more importantly, what do you sort of try to communicate in these classes? And if you teach private students, what are you sort of trying to teach them? What are you trying to have them learn? I know you were saying you're especially open to and receptive to people who maybe aren't as mature as
Mhm.
other people, and that's so important. I don't usually talk about myself on the podcast, but I started composing, my junior year of high school, and then I had to have a portfolio ready, and it was like
Yeah.
two pieces, and then one like noise improvisation with the guitar. Um, but the thing was, I got lucky because my mom emailed SUNY Purchase, and the head was Juan Ro at the time, and he said, I'm busy, but here's a list of two students, and the one at the top, she called and started studying with Jeremy Wexler, who's I think he's finishing up. He's no, he's finished his degree at UC Berkeley, but
Hmm.
um, he was a student at Purchase at the time, and he got me in through the door. I went to
Yeah.
concerts. I'm like, dude, I don't even know. Like, I just took a theory class, and I'm bored. I'm bored of guitar, and writing for other instruments seems easier and better because they take the time to learn it, and which is actually harder to do in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. And
That's
then
right.
that expanded into electronics and more broad things. Just kind of wider palettes. But
Yeah.
that initial sort of step was so scary, and I had a pretty strict sort of theory teacher, very traditional, like conservative box, for European taught. But he was like, "You're not gonna like make it, man. Like you got to start now. You don't understand. People have been doing this since you know really really early, and
Hmm.
and so I just I'm lucky at the time Duya and Suzanne Farron and Juan Ro took a chance on me, and Jeremy got my foot in the door. Um, but yeah, it's so important. So anyways, how what sort of approaches are you taking like in the collegiate community now?
Sure. So yes, a composition, a professor of assistant professor of composition slash theory. So
Mm-hmm.
that means I teach in the core theory curriculum every semester. So far in the last couple of years, I've pretty much only been teaching the fourth, basically fall and spring. I'm teaching theory four.
Okay.
So I get them right at the end when we're doing, 20th century stuff and form and analysis and, that kind of stuff, which is what I really like to teach anyway.
Yeah, of course.
Because it gets like, obviously the 20th century stuff I like to teach because it's, it's part of what I do. And it's also like illuminating students to, yes, there are still composers and we still do things,
Mm-hmm.
and more often than not, it doesn't sound like Beethoven, but here is what we do, and like, here are the techniques. I pretty much every semester I offer an electronic music course. So I teach three kind of in a rotation, and the fourth semester would be orchestration.
Mm-hmm.
And the electronic courses are kind of like a history and practice. So it's more history based than anything, but they do get a little bit of composition and
Mm-hmm.
software instruction. One is pretty much strictly composition in electronic music. We do a stereo piece and we do an 8-channel fixed media piece, and then I teach computer music programming, which is basically just a max class.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm teaching right now is my max class, and I've got some students who are going to do some crazy things. I already know, but it's going to be fun.
Nice.
Um, and then I teach composition lessons. So basically, the majority of the students who are composition majors at OU studied with me.
Mm-hmm.
Some might study with a grad student. Mark Phillips is still here. He teaches just a couple students per semester, and maybe a class, but I think that's going to be ending after this year. So, which is, I have to say, like, he retired from full time, but still stuck around and still like took a couple students, and maybe like He's done orchestration in the past couple of years. He's done new music ensemble. And having him around, having us overlap in the way we did for 4 years has just been phenomenal. Because obviously he's been here for a long time. He has the majority of the answers I'm seeking.
Yeah.
And he's just been phenomenal in terms of his his willingness to give me advice when I ask for it, but then to you know let me kind of shape the studio and the program in the way I want to. And that he's just been fantastic. So in terms of the composers that I teach, we're focusing on I want to go to where the student is, but I also want to push them further than they're probably comfortable with. Like you want to write in this style, great, let's do that, but I'm going to push you. You want to write in this style way over here, great, I'm still going to push you. So one of my grad students who's graduated, and he's doing a doctorate at University of Miami right now, in Florida, and he was writing this 8-channel fixed media piece in lessons with me, and it was almost there. It's a really good piece. His name's Ryan Seisky, and he hates this story because well, whatever, but for about 5 weeks I kept telling him, dude, you're 95% of the way there, but I'm not going to let you finish this until you're 100, because each week it was a different 5% that was like, this could be better. You've got something here, man. You've got it. You have to see this all the way through, and this piece could really be really good for you. And I just kept telling him, you're not there yet. You're not there yet. You're not there yet. And at the last lesson, I remember kind of saying, man, you are so close, but this one part needs to be better. And he just kind of got that look on his face. And I said, I've been telling you no a lot this semester, haven't I? And he's like, yeah, you have. And talking to him later, he was like, yeah, I really didn't like you during that semester. But then he said, but I totally appreciate you willing to not give up, because that piece that he wrote, he's gotten into so many festivals, and it was one of the determining factors of where he was going to go to grad school, and that piece really worked for him. So when I'm working with students, that's what I want to see from them. I want them to realize whatever they're doing, whatever the project is, I want them to realize it to the best of their ability. And I'm not one to just kind of let things go just for the sake of it being done if it's really good. So sometimes it's like, okay, let's just finish a piece.
We have to move on.
You got to move on.
You
You did it.
Stuff.
Yeah, you did it. You have a sense of completion. Get it performed. We'll see how you feel about it later. But when you've really got something, man, I'm we're going to work on it until it's all the way there. So that kind of mentality with my students, and also, having a very practical approach to composition. So we focus on, kind of the soft skills of composition, making a website, writing your program notes and bio, interviewing, for if it's either going to be for a job or for grad school or something like that, networking, how to talk about your music. And stuff like that, in addition to preparing just spotless clean scores, and getting recording. So that's another thing I'm doing with my students. I'm kind of pairing or partnering with the recording studio down here to make sure that my students are getting their performers in and getting good recordings, because as recordings are the currency. It's what opens doors for you. So you want to make sure you have the best thing that can open that door for you possible.
Yeah, it's so interesting too, because before COVID, certain places used to sort of say, either you can or you can't submit MIDI, but 90% of the time they'll just throw it away. Most
Yeah.
of the time that, like you are right in terms of things, but in terms of applying to schools, it's all, sometimes the other way around. They just look at your score. All right, this does
Yeah.
the thing. Oh, is he full of shit? Play it for 30
Yeah.
seconds, skip around.
Right.
It's so funny. But I think it's really great what you're saying, because a great teacher will have a lot of students that don't sound like them. Not that they don't sound like them, but a great teacher will have a lot of students, different styles. You'll get like Boulanger or Messiaen, who had huge influences. They had so many different people who writing in so many styles, and the styles aren't exactly what's important. It's the fact that they can teach the the student how to be themselves, and it seems like
Yeah.
that's what you're doing, but you're trying to sort of maximize it, which I really appreciate. I think that's a great thing, and I think students who aren't willing to learn and sort of stay in their box, you'll sort of maximize your strengths doing that, but there's going to be walls, and if you're not comfortable being pushed, why are you even in school to keep doing your thing? It's a little frustrating sometimes, but I'm really sort of happy about what you're saying, because there is sort of two ways to do it, and I wrote a lot in undergrad, and in grad school I had to sort of slow down. One semester was like 10 pieces, but yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple undergrads like that now too, and
Yeah.
and a couple like new grad students are like, well, wait, I need to move on. I'm like, let's take a beat, let's make this better.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you say, because it's when you have something. Oh, you're discovering something. It's bing bang boom. You got 2 weeks. All right, fine.
Yeah,
But this is what I would say if you wanted to make it better, or for your portfolio, like you need to make three perfect pieces that do you well. How are you gonna? All right, well, you got to keep working on it until the very last day before you hand it out. So
yeah.
it's an important skill to have for sure, and I'm glad you're doing it. Do you have advice for people in this current climate with COVID? Because you're a teacher, you're an educator. In my book, you've sort of made it in terms of you have a stable job, a source of income, from the state, which is awesome. But it's as I talked with Kurt Doles, and I ask a lot of people about this. How are you sort of managing that? How are you sort of able to, or not how you manage, but what advice would you have for people coming into this field, graduating, as someone who is sort of doing that?
Well, with respect to COVID or just in general?
Maybe in general, but in this situation especially.
Yeah. So I mean, with respect to COVID, how am I managing things? Not well. Like, I'll just be really honest. Just today I was kind of feeling down on myself because it seems like everyone has their next like online concert coming up, and and virtual concerts coming up, and it just seems like it's for me, it's just been enough to kind of keep my head above water, to do my teaching, to convert all my classes to online courses. And, I, at a certain point, like, you just have to kind of step back and say, okay, like, we are in an extreme situation right now. I cannot expect to have the same level of output, the same productivity, the same level of my own version of what success is right now as I have in normal times. So you just need to keep telling yourself that, even though like I intellectually know that, it doesn't change how you feel sometimes
Yeah, it
though.
just buries you.
Yeah. But in terms of, people that are coming out, that are trying to get into academia, first and foremost, have like you need to have a good like product to offer. The first thing of that product is the are your pieces, are your recordings, you know, and your scores, like all of those things, as professional as can be humanly possible. So with my students, even as soon as undergrads, like I've kind of made a document that here are all the notation guidelines that I expect you to do, and I'm going to call you on them whenever you do them. And and they get graded pretty, like their portfolios at the end of the semester get graded pretty harshly on notation, because notation is our communication. If you can't communicate, how are you ever going to expect to, like, get repeat performances? Someone will probably take a chance on you the first time, but then they see like, oh, what does this mean? How do I do this? And it's like, that's what's going to keep you from getting those players interested in your music, when they can't decipher the notation without your help. So it's like, that's one thing. Presenting yourself in a professional way, having really good recordings, really good performances, and then, setting up your documents in the most professional way as possible. The other thing is, like, rely on your network. Everyone, especially as a composer, you can't burn any bridges. Like, it's not in your best interest, because you never know who is going to, like, open a door for you. And if you go through just burning bridges, whether it be other composers or other performers or something like that, you limit the number of opportunities that could come your way. So in a way, it's like, you have to be friends with everyone. You have to be, like, able to walk between the different groups in the school, and be kind of that person that is. And I know, like, to most composers that sounds awful, because most composers, by virtue of the profession, most composers are introverts. I happen not to be. I'm an extrovert, so that skill was never a really difficult one for me. And being a percussionist, like, coming up in a percussion studio where it's a very, like, communal place, and everyone helps, everyone sets up, everyone tears down, even if you're not playing. Like, it's a very, like, teamwork minded place, and that's what Roger Shoup, former professor at BGSU, that's what he taught us. So I carried that into the composer world, and kind of pulled some other composers kicking and screaming with me into that mentality. When I was at Rice, another composer, one of my really, really dear best friends, Stephen Bachicha, he and I were the extroverts of the entire thing. And we, like, no, you got to do this. You got to, you've got to be social. You've got to network. You've got to talk to people about your pieces, and do everything like that. So all of those, that's like the behind the scenes work, that you have to get ready for. But then the actual part of, going out and getting a job.
Yeah, that's what I'm interested in.
Well, yeah, and that's what everyone's interested in, right? The first thing I would say is that you're not going to be right for the majority of the jobs that are out there. Like, the hiring committee and the dean, or the director of the school, or whoever it is, the people making the decisions, they have a vague idea of what they want. And you can kind of see that in the job descriptions. They'll say, we want the person to be able to do this, and maybe one of these things. And increasingly, electronic music is one of those things. Yeah. So for anyone out there who thinks they're just going to be an acoustic composer, it is very few and far between people that can actually do it at this point. All the acoustic jobs are, like, going to the composers who have kind of aged out of technology. I mean, Eleni Lilios is one of the few that is, like, hanging with it and being amazing for, well into her career. But I mean, at Rice, my two of my main professors, Art Gottschalk was the main technology guy until he decided, I don't want to do this anymore. We're going to hire another person that's younger than me to do it. And that's usually what's happening. So a lot of those entry-level jobs, they come with that technology side to it. So if you don't know music technology, get on it, because the majority of the jobs that I've seen, that when I've been looking, they all had that caveat. It's either that or, like, really no theory. You know what I mean? So, so yeah, having those, like, maximizing your skills, like, that make you more attractive to potential hiring committees and schools. That's what it's about. And that's, even as undergrads and master students, that's what I tell my composers. You want to have as many diverse skills as you can. Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do that? You want to be the person that can say yes, and maybe you don't have a degree in it, but you have enough background to say, you know what, I can learn that and I can do that for you. One of the pieces of advice that Shihui Chen gave me when I was going to interview in China, and that I still take with me to this very day, like it's like inside of me in most all things, and I imbue it to my students, is she just said, be humble and helpful. Like, be humble. Don't come in there thinking like, let me tell you how I'm going to make your institution world class.
Yeah.
Be helpful. Oh, we're thinking about doing this. Oh, I've done this. I could probably help with that. Those two words, humble and helpful, that gets you a long way. So like, positioning yourself in the marketplace to be as versatile as you possibly can, as skilled as you possibly can, have a really good product to show off, meaning your compositions and your CV, your cover letter, that stuff. That's what you have to do. And then what it comes down to is, are they looking for you? And the majority of the places are not. I'm just gonna be real honest. Like, the term good fit, it's kind of a cliche in the hiring, but it's really what it is about. Like, are you a good fit for this place? So let's say like you apply for something, you get past the initial interviews, and then you're down to like the on-site interview or something like that. As someone who has been on the other side, I mean, I've been on hiring committees in China, which is a really weird like experience that I have being a very young professor. Like, I should not have been on these hiring committees. I should not have been a chair of a hiring committee before, but I have been, because we were a new school and we needed to hire people. So I kind of learned from my older colleagues that were there who had done this before. When you get to that on-site interview, pretty much anyone could get the job at that point. You're all differently but equally qualified, and then it becomes about, can your personality win the job?
Yeah.
And that's you are auditioning for it, and little things that you wouldn't really think about can make the difference in that situation, like eye contact, posture, your general, like, the look of your face. Are you like excited? Are you energetic? That kind of stuff. You really cannot discount those soft skills, because I've been on the other side of it, and I've seen where those soft skills like kind of turn people off, like not having those soft skills.
Yeah.
Not being able to engage with other faculty members that you're like at a lunch or a dinner or something. Contrary to the popular belief, you're on the audition the entire time. You're being interviewed the entire time you're there, and these interviews usually last for like a day. They pick you up in the morning, you teach a couple classes, you have a couple interviews, you go to lunch with faculty members, you're still in the interview. Then you go to you do another class, another presentation, maybe teach a lesson or something like that. You go to dinner, you're still in the interview. All of that time is they're gathering information, even though they might say like, you're relax, you're still there. I mean, like you cannot assume that, like, just because you're at dinner or lunch or something, that this doesn't count in some way.
Or you're even like in the bathroom and one of their students is, like interacting with you, and in the lesson,
hopefully not, but yeah,
of hiring this guy, but he didn't wash his hands, or something like as small as that could be like, oh, well, we'll hire the other person because.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but like, I I've talked to many other composers who were kind of my colleagues who were all in the same situation together. We're all like looking for jobs at the same times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's those like you just have to realize like at that point it's about you. They know your CV. You obviously you still have to come prepared.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to be able to answer their questions and give good answers and give a good teaching demonstration. In my case, I was teaching a theory class, an electronic music class, and a composition lesson. So I had three things to teach, and I gave like a presentation on my music. In addition to having like four interviews that
Mm-hmm.
day. So it's exhausting, but you can't show that. You just got to be like, let's go.
Yeah.
I'm there. You can collapse when you get back to your hotel room, which I did.
Yeah. What is like you got to be the best version of yourself, and it sounds like you're also talking about being able to take the ridicule, the constant rejection, sort of like what actors talk about. You need to
Hmm.
do 1,000 before you book one audition,
Oh yeah.
kind of thing. And then the other thing you're sort of saying that I've sort of seen in the rock and metal community as well, having multiple streams of revenue.
Hmm.
For example, you're touring, you're getting pieces performed, but that's not enough income. You're teaching, maybe you're also working in the production department. You're working on a max class, or whatever class. You're teaching on the side as well, um, like private lessons. So everything you're saying is sort of been mirrored by a lot of stuff, and it's really good to hear that that's happening as well.
Yeah, I mean
That is the path. Yeah.
the I mean, I could definitely be doing better at the like multiple revenue streams. Like there are definitely composers out there who I know who are just killing it in that field, where they've got stuff coming in from, performance royalties, publishing,
Mm-hmm.
private lessons, stuff like that. Like for one of my very good friends, Jamie Lee Sampson comes to
Yep.
mind. Another Bowling Green grad. She is before COVID happened, she was going to make like half of her income on the year on like performance royalties or like publishing and commissions.
Mm-hmm.
She was going to make like so much of her annual income on that alone. And I've often gone to her and Jamie, give me advice. You're killing it right now. Like and but yeah, that having multiple skills that can generate multiple streams of revenue for you is super important right now, especially with
Mm-hmm.
COVID, because the obviously performances aren't happening the way they used to be. So what other skills do you have? Can you edit a video?
Mm-hmm.
Can you produce something like this? All those skills are really valuable right now.
Yeah, and I met her at Soundscape. She was the coordinator, and she presented,
Yep.
and you know I, these ideas probably happened with that. When she was in Bowling Green, she made the micro operas, but she seems to be one of the forerunners in adjective music, which we can talk about in a sec. But
Sure.
bassoon multiphonics book,
Yeah.
bassoon player, teacher, composer, like, and then
Performer. She still performs,
performer
and
is, yeah, I should have mentioned
and
that.
and she's got a new book coming out on
Oh, really?
entrepreneurship.
Perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, I know we're running out of time, but I did want to talk to you about your music because listening to it for a bit, Desert Miniatures and some of your electronic pieces as well. Well, what really struck me is when I talked to Lilios about writing a bio or writing a hey, this is me, it's sort of you put the most important thing at the top. I'm concerned with perception, I'm concerned with poetry, I'm concerned with, and you sort of list the things that your music is influenced by or doing. And in your bio, correct me if I'm wrong, but you talk about finding beauty in unconventional places, and then you go on with poetry, mathematics, neurology, and how
mhm.
those elements influence you. But the beauty in unconventional places to me was really interesting. So can you talk to me a little bit about like what's sort of at the core of a lot of your music and what you're sort of trying to achieve with it, maybe, or what you're sort of doing when you compose? It's a pretty broad question, but
Yeah.
and it's but if you had to sort of from like the top down, summarize, sort of broadly, what's sort of the core, the philosophy you're sort of
Sure.
looking into, or what are the elements of it? Feel free to rant as well.
I think that when I'm working on a new piece, the most fun part of the process for me is starting from that idea, which very often is not musical.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of times I'm thinking, how can I turn this thing that I'm interested in into music in some way? So that first, like playing around with ideas and getting my conceptual side of the piece together, that's often the most fun part of the process for me. Like those big ideas. Because those ideas, the piece is perfect in your head. You don't have to worry about rhythms and dynamics or anything like that. It's just perfect, and it's just up there, and I love that part. And then I have to go and ruin it by like trying to figure out pitches and rhythms and everything. But I would say like that is something that I do pretty much with every piece. I try and seek out something that I'm either trying to translate or the piece is going to be about. I am not a big like absolute music person. Um, I've never really been able to work that way. Um, I need something kind of guiding me and directing me. And I think that experience came from one of the first times, or the first couple times I set some poetry,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh, this is so much easier to write when you have something that's guiding you, something that's helping you make some of those choices. So um having that thing, like one of my more recent pieces, it's a saxophone duo called Flora, and I wrote it for the Deco Ensemble, and I wrote it like in April. Everything was canceled. All of my spring festivals that I was in were canceled, and I mean Praecepta was canceled. Like so I was feeling very down, and this opportunity came up through Adjective New Music, the composer collective I belong to, and Jamie Lee Sampson and Andrew Martin Smith. They're the co-founders, and some of their friends who are in Fredonia, two saxophonists, were like, "Hey, we're going to put on these concerts. Anyone want to write for us within Adjective?" And I was like, "Yes." Yes, yes, yes. I like nothing is happening for me right now, and I want something to happen.
Yeah.
So with that piece, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to write six short movements, six miniatures. What are they all going to be about? And the most fun, it's called Flora because weirdly enough, like when I began that piece, I was only wanting to like write about color. Like I had watched a color theory video with my then kindergartner for her online kindergarten class, and I was like really intrigued by color in some way. And I was like, okay, well, there are three primary colors, three secondary colors. That gives me six. Those are six movements. How do I articulate those colors? And it was my wife's interest in plants. Like our
Mm-hmm.
house is just a jungle of house plants. And she's been, ever since we got back to the United States, she's been kind of like figuring out how to grow these like weird and exotic plants. And
Whoa.
that was so it was like color and plants. Okay, let's try and find something there. So I just started researching, different types of plants within like the color field. So like the very first movement is red, and that's this flower called the Passiflora alata, which is the red passion flower.
Mm-hmm.
And like just that thing of being able to see that image and see like how I respond to that helped me write the piece, and that's why and I think that's one of the more like that's closer to absolute music than anything that I do. Most of the time it's like I have text, or I have this conceptual idea, or something is driving the
Mm-hmm.
work that is probably non-musical. So that's where that like beauty in unconventional places using non-traditional means line kind of comes from. It's like I'm almost never music is almost never what makes me write music,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's sort of the opposite of the electroacoustic, or the acousmatic idea of the sound is everything, and taking
Hmm.
the what's it called, the connotations out of the sound.
Right.
So it's pretty interesting. Uh, yeah, and it seems like you do varying degrees. Like maybe you map on very strict parameters of how brainwaves work, for example. I don't know if that's something you did, or some math fractal thing, and you map it in pitch space and rhythmic space, and
Hmm.
you do stuff with it. But then it seems like um, you also do the thing where you figure out what you're perceiving, and then your reaction to it you're also mapping onto mapping onto music. And it's such an interesting process. Iancu Dumitrescu and Ana Maria Avram talk about this sometimes. It's like the alchemy. It's such a
Hmm.
beautiful sort of way to say it, because you are taking these things external to you, or measurements of things external to you, or your perception of things external to you, and then you're reacting to them, and then you're transmitting that, even in the sort of strictest, you're mapping sine tones to electronic brain waves. That's still the choice
Yeah.
to do that, and how you're doing that, and the ranges you put that at, because we wouldn't be able to hear them. So it's such
Hmm.
an interesting process. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say that oftentimes I view the world through the lens of music. So like if I'm like really interested in like climate change or something like that, or nature or plants or whatever it is, like I'm learning about this stuff, but always with that, like, well, are there musical ideas in here? How can I turn this into music? So viewing the world through that lens of music is how other things can, like non-musical things, can come in and inspire music to come out.
Hmm. Yeah, and the transmutation from like external thing, perception of external thing, and then resynthesis
Hmm.
into the field of music, where vibrations are there's if you go into sound art, those lines start to get blurred. But
Yeah.
it is such an interesting sort of thing, and it's always so interesting to hear sort of different people's reaction, because I know for me, I tend to do a little bit of both. Like the concept really helps me get into it, and then sometimes I'm also just playing with sound, and it takes me a while to unlock a piece, but then I can kind of write it pretty fast, because
Yeah.
okay, once you figure out what the piece is about, then you can
Hmm.
go back and rewrite the whole thing, or it just depends what you're doing. But
Yeah.
it's really interesting to hear that. And it's so interesting talking to you, because it's a bit like looking into a mirror. Like I'm also social.
Right.
I also had a lot of those external skills, but I sucked at notation. So
Hmm.
until my senior year, I was like, oh, I was like, my teacher was like, if you have someone play this who's not from here, what are you gonna do? Bang down the door and
Right.
shine like you can't be everywhere. You can't just have this crap here. I
Yeah.
showed him the big piece that I sort of had played, and he's like, all right, we got to make this look good. Like the piece I heard is not what's on this page. And,
Right.
and if the players weren't good, and the conductor Dominic Donato wasn't like buying into this, and you weren't in the room. So I
Yeah.
think it's all super important. And I thank you very much for coming here. I thought it was really awesome, really cool. And I really liked the way you're sort of doing things very linearly and strictly, and giving very um, not strictly, but very cohesive, very step by step advice. Like you need this check mark, this check mark, this check mark,
Hmm.
this check mark, and then it becomes about this, and this.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, in terms of the career, getting a job, that kind of stuff. And I've known plenty of friends who, it went the other way for them.
Mhm.
Um, like you just have to, you have to put yourself in the best position you possibly can to get in that door. And then once you're in the door, it's all about you. You have to use all the other skills that you've been developing to win that job. And I thought, of my friends, we were all going up for jobs at the same time. I looked at everyone else's materials and I was like, wow, I don't really stack up next to some of these other people. But when it came down to it, like I I feel like I don't get that many opportunities, but the opportunities I do get, I can win.
You can capitalize on.
Yeah, you can capitalize on because um, I'm thinking about all those other things that maybe people who just let their CV do their talking for them, maybe they're not thinking about those things. So it's like, again, you have as many skills as possible to put you in the best position to succeed. And at the end of the day, you still might not be what they're looking for, but you just have to realize that like if you do all that work, if you put yourself in that good position, then that shot is going to drop at some of these at some point. Like there will be a fit for you. You just need to kind of like it's kind of like if you lose a competition or something, like, all right, don't take it personally, they weren't looking for me, that's fine. I do what I do, I don't need validation. My self-worth is not tied to others like assessment of me. So as long as you keep that not only in the composition world but in the like going on the job hunt and everything, as long as you keep that, something is going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, it's all right to be sad, but you got to come back the next day, like the day after, and just give 100%.
Absolutely.
Easier said than done, obviously. I'm not.
Of course.
I obviously don't have an academic job but yeah, it's so interesting to sort of think about a lot of this stuff, and to sort of see how it works. But thank you so much. Do you want to plug your podcast as well?
Sure. If you want to listen to it, it's the Lexical Tones podcast. It's put out by Adjective New Music. On it, we do a couple different types of episodes, but mostly it's just kind of one-on-one interviews with me and another composer, kind of dissecting their music. We also kind of do the Adjective New Music Composer Collective. We're 14 composers, about to be more. Stay tuned on that. They'll be announced pretty soon. We're 14 composers who all kind of publish together and just kind of help each other out in various ways. And so a lot of times on other episodes, we have other collective members come on and we get drinks and talk about whatever we want to.
That's awesome.
And other times, it's like we'll go to Seamus and kind of do, or SCI or different festivals, and kind of like give kind of reports from those. But you can find Lexical Tones on iTunes, on Stitcher, and it's hosted on SoundCloud. And if you want to look for it, you can go to adjectivenewmusic.com, and there should be all the information you want there.
Awesome. We'll drop a link in the description. So Rob McClure is going to give a masterclass at Praecepta on November 9th. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll catch you guys on the next one. All right. Bye. See you guys.